Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So I sometimes get asked to talk about menswear. I'm gonna be honest, my channel, it's mainly a handbag focused channel, but of course I like to talk about fashion in a more holistic way, the aesthetics, the style, what's happening in fashion. But I do get requests to talk about men's fashion and men's handbags specifically. So I thought today we would expand on this ongoing series looking at style icons. And I wanted to talk about someone who I think has a very influential style, even if people don't realize it. It's someone who I think has had an iconic style when it comes to bags. Today we're going to talk about the style of Serge Gainsbourg. I think of his style as sort of having this elegant slouch. There's sort of this disheveled look. He has this left bank style, and you can tell he's wearing beautiful, excellent clothes. There is this look of this quote unquote like effortlessness, but it's actually incredibly curated over years and decades, really. His style is like a menswear fashion equivalent of a lived-in Birkin. Of course, I say that, and I think one of the most iconic parts of his wardrobe that he wore and carried was the Hermes HAC. And this was before Jane Birkin wore the Birkin, before Birkin bag ever existed, before it was created in her name. The HAC is a part of Hermes history. It was created in 1892 as a carry-all for equestrians, means essentially high belts when translated, referring to the strap closure. He famously wore this bag. Here he is at the Heathrow Airport in 1971, Jane Birkin at the time with her famous wicker basket, and he has the HAC. We all know Jane Birkin's Birkin, but before that there was Serge's HAC. And I found this interesting anecdote from this menswear blog, Belgian Dandy, I'll link down below, but they wrote that when Jane received her first Birkin bag, Serge jokingly suggested that she burn it with a cigarette or throw it into a river, basically to quote unquote break it in, which I think perfectly captures his relationship to luxury. He loved the quality, he loved the craftsmanship, but anything that was too stiff or pristine felt wrong to him. He even allegedly threw an Hermes tie into a fireplace because it was quote unquote too stiff. And the HAC Serge carried was eventually auctioned by Jane in 2019 to raise funds for a charity. She even said when promoting that sale that this bag was the source of inspiration for the Birkin, which is quite obvious. I also think is quite interesting when looking at both of these two style icons. You can see how like Jane and Serge, like they both influenced each other stylistically. Of course, they were together in a romantic relationship, but they also had a professional relationship, and there's also this stylistic relationship you see between the two of them with a lot of similarities. You see that especially with how he famously wore these Repetto. These are the ZZ shoes, one of his style signatures. And Repetto is a French brand known for their dance shoes, be it ballet, jazz, performance footwear. Jane Birkin herself wore Repetto. Lots of famous celebrities did as well. Performers, Mick Jagger, you see him wearing these as well. But this from the Maison Gainsbourg website. Emblematic of the Gainsbourg style, the model was designed in the 70s by Rose Repetto for ballet dancer Zizi Jeanmaire, for whom Serge had composed a made-to-measure version of Elisa. Inspired by the slippers worn by jazz dancers, the ZZ is made of soft, fine leather to follow the foot's movements to perfection, thanks to the same French manufacturing technique used for ballerinas, cousu retourné, a historic Repetto process. When Jane Birkin spotted them in a sales basket, she immediately imagined Serge with these ZZ. And the way he styled them, he wore them without socks. Jane encouraged him to wear these sockless in this kind of more undone kind of way. And again, you see this is where his style really intersects with culture. Early on in his career, he was very inspired by the style of musicians at the time. He was also very much a part of the music scene at the time. He was also very instrumental in the yeah music movement. When we think of like the mod style, this was sort of like the French extension of that. It was very pop, very youth culture. You definitely see that in his early style. He also famously wore the trench coat and double-breasted, but it was in the styling here with the collar at the back popped, slightly fitted, never pristine. It kind of has this like put togetherness, but it's also very casual and it has this relaxedness. He also loved suits, not immaculate ones though, be it like navy, be it charcoal, be it black. It could be worn with or without a tie, paired with his scuffed shoes or boots. And he was known for getting his suits from Renoma, and he and the French brand brand had a significant connection in the 1970s when he and Jane were brand ambassadors, and of course they were known for their iconic style. They were featured in Renoma campaigns. They embodied the brand's very chic, modern French aesthetic that aligned with his own personal flair, helped to sell the brand, linking his musical and personal brand with the Renoma's fashion identity. At the time, Karl Lagerfeld and Yves Saint Laurent also shopped there as well. Renoma is still in Paris today. Serge and Jane were also muses of the brand Trudy. Here you see them in this very well-known advertising campaign where they're both styled and wearing his and her versions of the same clothes. But yeah, when you look at these photos from 1969, it really kind of captures that era as this defining cultural duo of the 60s and 70s, known for their music, style, their very public romance. And this photo shoot features them in their very famous home and how they were one of the most iconic couples in French culture, capturing this very unique chemistry. The denim on denim was also a signature for him, this full denim look, or what is often described as the Canadian tuxedo. He often wore Lee Cooper denim, also Jane wore it too, which really helped to boost Lee Cooper's cool factor, as it was this embodiment of both rock and pop style. And of course he wore these full-on denim looks, but there were many times where he would incorporate a denim shirt with a tailored suit that kind of exudes this French nonchalance. You see how also Serge's style really evolved from this jazz-inspired style early on to something a little bit more curated, but still effortless and disheveled at the same time. A key component of that was the denim. He was actually known for saying, quote, "For me, jeans represent relaxation, nonchalance, casualness, elegance, you know. When I go to Maxim's, I wear a Saint Laurent suit with a denim shirt." And again, this sort of mixing of high and low fashion was a hallmark of his approach to style. You see Serge throughout the years, often with Jane in very casual denim outfits, whether it be in Paris or their trips to the south of France. It was always a part of his wardrobe. And you even see how like Saint Laurent today, in recent collections, there is channeling of this Serge Gainsbourg approach to fashion and styling with his jackets. Another thing Serge did was incorporate military shirts into his wardrobe, pairing them with everything from blazers to denim, and there was juxtaposition of something that looks quite rugged mixed with something very sophisticated. You feel that tension in his style that also feels very French at the same time. Another thing he also famously wore was the sailor sweater. Usually he would style it in an unbuttoned way, very relaxed. He also wrote the song Peau Marine, or what's translated as navy blue sweater. He wrote this song and it was performed by Isabelle Adjani in 1983. But again, you see how his fashion is also a part of the culture of France, and you see why he's such a celebrated figure. Another sort of part of his style is his disheveled hair. It's his permanent 5 o'clock shadow, always holding a cigarette. This kind of look like he's been up all night at a bar in Paris. Like that disheveled look, it was a natural part of his style. He also wore these Pierre Marley sunglasses, and he was an optician known for his very experimental and sculptural frames that added this element of mystery and eccentricity. Honestly, I would love to have a pair of these. In the 80s especially, he almost never went out in public without sunglasses. They weren't just practical, they were part of his persona. He really favored the Marley Sport model. Even now, these sunglasses are quite collectible. Like original pairs have sold for very high prices at auction. And he also had quite a substantial watch and jewelry collection, a Rolex Daytona, a Breitling on a custom strap, an Omega Speedmaster. And this is a part of his style that I also think really just made it feel like really personal to him. These jewelry pieces really just add so much more dimension to his looks, be it the Cartier, the sapphire pendant, sapphire and diamond tennis bracelet, diamond solitaire ring, delicate chain necklaces. Jane and Serge also famously had these matching key necklaces. There's this really great article from Vogue France, which I'll link down below, but his jewelry collection was really quite sophisticated, but again, worn with with this like absolute nonchalance. And I think overall what I really admire about Serge's style was he really did have these core sets of looks. You could probably say like a uniform, but he had various sort of styles throughout the years. You would see how he would wear quote unquote more like masculine pieces, like, you know, military shirts, trenches, denim, that gave him kind of this rugged look. Then he would also embrace things like jewelry, bags, delicate shoes, these dance shoes. He blended American daywear and Parisian nightwear, and just everything felt so lived in, like genuinely lived in. I think this reflected his style, this was his personality. And Serge was also a complicated person. He was not a saint, far from it. He struggled with alcohol, it shaped the latter part of his life in tragic ways, but his visual identity became so iconic. You see him in his later years. There's this moment where these French children, they're all dressed up like him as a tribute to him. The blazer, the sunglasses, the beard, the whiskey, the cigarette. He had this style that was instantly recognizable. So many fashion brands at the time, Saint Laurent to Rudy, to Renoma, to even brands today. I think a lot of Celine, we see this kind of style, APC with this kind of left bank approach. You definitely see his style has definitely inspired even like these top tier luxury brands. You see his influence in fashion, even if it's not so overt, it's definitely present. And of course, talking about his style, and of course he was this iconic musician, wrote some of the most iconic songs that are so embedded in French culture, but you also see style reflected the culture as well. But yes, anyways guys, that's my video for today. Thank you so much for joining me in another one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.